செல்வச்சந்நிதி முருகன் ஆலயம் யாழ் நகரிலிருந்து 22 கிலோமீட்டர் தொலைவில் இம்முருகன் ஆலயம் அமைந்துள்ளது. இங்கு பூஜை செய்பவர்கள் ஏனைய ஆலயங்களில் பூஜை செய்பவர்கள் போலல்லாமல் தமது வாயினை வெள்ளை துணியினால் கட்டியவாறு பூஜை செய்யும் கப்பூராளிகளாவர். வல்லிபுர ஆழ்வார் கோவில் 13ஆம் நூற்றாண்டில் கட்டப்பட்ட இக்கோவில் அமைக்கப்பட்ட காலம் தமிழ் பௌத்தர்களும் இந்துக்களும் ஒன்றாக வாழ்ந்த காலமாகும். இவ்வாலயத்தின் மூலஸ்தானத்தில் சங்கு சக்கரம் வைத்து வழிபாடு மேற்கொள்ளப்படுகின்றது. பருத்தித்துறை நகரில் இருந்து கிழக்காக 6 கிலோமீட்டர் தொலைவில் இக்கோவில் அமைந்துள்ளது. நைனை நாகபூஷணியம்மன் ஆலயம் வடமாகாணத்தின் நாகர் வழிபாட்டின் கோவிலாக காணப்படும் இக்கோவில் 64 சக்தி பீடங்களில் ஒன்றாகவும் கருதப்படுகின்றது. ராமாயணத்தில் ராவணன் சக்தி வழிபாடு செய்த தலமாகவும் இது
Welcome everyone. We are going to start the session today. I know all of you must be from all over the world. It's almost tea time for us here in the UK, but some of you may have just woken up and sipping your morning cup of coffee, and the others may have just finished lunch. But welcome to everyone. Dear friends, we are gathered here today to watch the film premiere of The Buried Truth. This is a film produced by Net FM Balumgala team. And on behalf of all the organizers today, I thank them for giving us this opportunity. The role played by the Net FM Balumgala team to invigorate the interest amongst the Sri Lankan community about the UNHRC resolution on Sri Lanka is highly commendable. Thank you so much for your hard work. This film premiere today is jointly organized by the London Initiative and Ontario Centre for Policy Research, two policy research think tanks based on either side of the Atlantic. Before we move on, let me introduce the two panelists here with us today. I have with us today Mr. Jayaraj Palihawadana, who is a solicitor by profession and is currently based in London. He currently chairs the London Initiative. And on the other side of the Atlantic, we have Dr. Neville Havegay, who is an adjunct professor and research fellow at the International Centre for Interdisciplinary Research in Law at Laurentian University, Canada. Dr. Havegay is also a senior policy analyst at the Ontario Centre for Policy Research. Before we begin today, I think a little background to why we are here today is timely. As you all know, the 46th session of the UN Human Rights Council is currently ongoing. Michelle Bachelet, UN High Commissioner, said, and I quote, "Given the demonstrated inability and unwillingness of Sri Lankan government to advance accountability at the national level, it is time for international action to ensure justice for international crimes. States should also pursue investigations and prosecution in their national courts." This was a serious comment made by the High Commissioner. Next week, there will be a resolution on Sri Lanka tabled at the United Nations Human Rights Council with Ms. Bachelet's recommendations. The draft resolution recommends creating a repository to collect evidence so that perpetrators can be accused in other countries using evidence from this repository if needed. So what is this accountability they are talking about? Are you ready to listen to a story? So the narrative goes like this. This is the narrative created by LTT supporters, West, as well as the UNHRC most of the time. There was a civil war between Sinhalese and Tamils in Sri Lanka some time back. There have been atrocities committed by both the parties, but unfortunately, All LTT leaders have sadly died, and therefore only Sri Lankan government can be held accountable. The evidence base for these allegations come from a disputed report called OISL report, created looking only at the time period from 2002 to 2012. This can't be the full story, right? So no one committed atrocities before 2002. All LTT membership and those who aided their terror activities vanished into thin air in May 2009. Government rehabilitated more than 12,000 LTT cadres. Who are they then? We hear stories about Tamil mothers looking for their lost ones in international media. But do we hear about crying mothers from the south, especially the border villages who lost their sons and daughters because the terrorists murdered them in cold blood? Do we hear about relatives mourning their loved ones lost because of LTT bomb blasts? The film today is all about those unheard victims' voices, to show the world that there is tears in Sinhalese Muslim and Tamil mothers from the south too. But we have to tell at the outset, we at London Initiative or Ontario Centre for Policy Research is not trying to market these tears to win sympathy. Our effort is to show the world that punishment in the name of accountability is not going to wipe the tears from the mothers' faces, either in the north or the south. What will happen if we tell the mothers in Jaffna mourning for their dead son or daughter, we found your dead son or daughter's identity. He or she was killed in the battle as an LTT terrorist. By the way, we also found that he or she is responsible for the attack on Srima Bodhi, the sacred Buddhist temple in Anuradhapura, that killed nearly 150 innocent civilians. And because your son or daughter is a murderous terrorist, he will forever be a disgrace to your family. How would you think she would take it? And if we then go to the south and tell another mourning mother, we found the murderer who killed your son or daughter. Unfortunately, the terrorist is dead now, but we know that he is son of Sellamma from Jaffna. And by the way, his sister is currently working in Vellavatta. How would she take it? That's why we don't believe in quenching thirst for revenge by so-called accountability, which is not the way forward to heal the wounds in post-war Sri Lanka. We believe the way forward to achieve peace and reconciliation is through forgiveness, not by rubbing salt on their wounds. In Sri Lanka, the Buddhists are very familiar with the story of Angulimala, a serial killer who was forgiven by Lord Buddha. The Hindus in Sri Lanka all know the story of Arjuna and the Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, when Lord Krishna repeatedly forgave Arjuna. Therefore, forgiveness is in our blood. We Sri Lankans are a forgiving nation. More on this will be discussed by Dr. Hebage later on. Keeping these thoughts in our mind, let's watch the short film, The Buried Truth.
The echoes of dread still linger.
ඇතුළුනේ වෙඩි තියාගෙනමයි ඊට පස්සේ ඌ වෙඩි තියලා මම මැරිලා නැහැ කියලා බෙල්ල පෑගුවා.
The fear in their minds and the pain in their hearts still need time to heal.
මගේ මහත්තයා නැති වුණා. මගේ මහත්තයා නැති වෙනකොට මට චූටි පුතා හම්බ වෙන්න හිටියේ. මාස 7ක් වෙනවා.
Who is responsible for this? The time has come to uncover the hidden truth. It has been almost 12 years since the end of a 30-year-long war between the Sri Lankan government and one of the most brutal terrorist organizations in the world, the LTTE. The allegations of war crimes against the Sri Lankan government and its armed forces are still in debate even without credible evidence. Certain Western countries, including the LTTE diaspora, are continuously demanding strict legal action against Sri Lanka. But unfortunately, the countless number of war crimes committed by the LTTE are left in the dark. And through this documentary, we will unveil some crucial evidence of war crimes committed by the LTTE and ask all the concerned citizens of the world to consider them in their judgment or deductions. Although the actual conflict was between the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam and the Sri Lankan Armed Forces, the LTTE's reign of terror reached far beyond borders and military targets, destroying everything in their path, from villages to schools, even temples, churches, and mosques, brutally killing thousands of innocent civilians.
මේ ගම්මානේ ජීවත්තුනේ මිනිසු සතු එළගවයෙන් එළුවෝ අති කරගෙන තමයි ජීවත් වුනේ. මේ අතරදී 1990 මේ පල්ලිය කොඩල ගංවැසියන්ගේ ඉලගවයෙන් මීගවයෙන් සම්පූර්ණම 1000ට ඉහළ ප්‍රමාණයක් කොටි රස්තවාදී විසින් පැහැරගෙන ගිය ඇත. ඒ අතරදී 1991 සෙක්ටම්බර් මාසයේ 16 වෙනි දිනේ පල්ලිය කොඩලට කොටි රස්තවාදී පැමිණි 13 දෙනෙක් ඝාතනය කර ඇද්දී ඒත් මේ ගම්මානේ මේ ඉපදුන ගම්මානේ අපේ මව් රටේ කියලා මව් පොළව මේක අතහැරලා යන්න බෑ කියලා අපි හිටියා මොනවා වුණුත් කමන්නේ කියලා. ඊට පස්සේ 1991 ගහුවට පස්සේ අවුරුද්දකට පස්සේ 1992 ඔක්තෝබර් මාස 15 වෙනි දිනේ උදේ පාන්දර 4ට පමණ කොටි රස්තවාදී මේ ගම්මානට ගොස් ගම්වැසියන් 240කට වැඩි පිරිසක් ඝාතනය කර වඩවාහරේ විනාශ කර ගෙවල් වලට ගිනි තබා සම්පූර්ණය කර ගියේ අතරේ ඊට පස්සේ අපි මෙතන මේ පල්ලිය කොඩල්ලෙන් අවතන් වී ලංකාපුර ප්‍රාදේශීයේ තම්බාල ප්‍රාදේශීයේ අනාථ කඳවුරු ගාගෙන අනාථ කඳවුරු පොඩි පෙළ හදාගෙන අවුරුදු 10ක් විතර ඒ ගම්මානේ ජීවත් වුණා. ඒ ප්‍රාදේශයේ ජීවත් වුණා. පල්ලියේ කොඩල්ලේ ගම් ආරක්ෂාවට පොලිසියයි හමුදාවේ දමා හිටියා. ඒ අතරදී පොලිසියෙන් ඇවිල්ලා ගමේ කටිට මේ පල්ලියට ඇවිල්ලා එලවුස් කරලා කිව්වා පල්ලියට රෙස් වෙන්න කියලා. රෙස් වෙලා අපිට දැනුමක් දුන්නා යම්කිසි වෙලාවක මේ පල්ලිය කොඩල්ලේ කොටි යම්කිසි වෙලාවක පැමිණුණොත් අපි මේ නලාව ගෙනල්ලා තියෙනවා මේ නලාව කරකවනවා ඒ කරකවන සද්දේ බල්ලාවරවනවා වගේ. ඒ සද්දට ඔයගොල්ලෝ යම්කිසි වෙලාවක කොටි මේ පල්ලිය කොඩලට පාත් වුණොත් පල්ලියට රෙස් වෙන්න කියලා. ඒ අතරදී මේ ඒ කටිට වඩියාවට පස්සේ මේක කරකවන්න තියා ඒක ගණ්ඩවත් වෙලා වෙන්නේ. ඒ වුණාට අර කියාපු කතාවේ මිනිස්සුගේ මතයට තියුණා. ඒ අතරදී මිනිස්සු පල්ලියට රැස් වුණා. පල්ලියට රැස් වෙලා ඉන්නකොට තමයි පල්ලියට ගෙව්වේ. පල්ලිය තමයි සෑ ඉන්න පිරිසක් නැති වුණා. 200කට 100කට වැඩි ගම්වැසියන් පල්ලිය තමයි වෙනස් වුණා. මගේ දෙමව්පියෝ මගේ සහෝදරයෝ මගේ මස්සිනා මගේ ලොකු තාත්තා මේකේ මගේ දරුවෝ සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම නැති වුණේ මෙතන පල්ලියේ.
The Tamil Tigers ethnically cleansed more than 100,000 Sinhalese and Muslims from the north and staged a series of massacres in the east to get rid of the Muslim and the Sinhala population. They want to create a mono-ethnic state, very much like what Hitler wanted to do, propagating the Aryan race. Because Prabhakaran was influenced by Hitler's ideology. And among the massacres that Prabhakaran mounted was the Aranthalawa massacre, where 37 people were killed, of which 33 were monks, including 30 young Buddhist monks, what we call novices. That was on June 2nd, 1987, a very crucial period where the Tamil Tigers staged a number of attacks. This killing continued, and May 17th, 2000, in Mangala Ramaya Vihara in Battikuru, again the Tamil Tigers attacked and killed 29 people, of which 25 were civilians and 9 were children, and 78 were injured. There was no war crimes investigation for those, and it is imperative to investigate who funded these attacks, who trained the terrorists, to bring all these people to justice. Only then there will be a comprehensive response to what happened in Sri Lanka, and to ensure that this does not happen ever again in any other country.
මේක තමයි කඩවත මඩුව. ඓතිහාසික පුරාණ උරුමයක් තියෙන කඩවත මඩුව. ත්‍රස්ත ඉතිහාසයේ පළවෙනිම සිවිල් ඝාතනය සිද්ධ වුණෙත් මේ ගමේ තමයි. මේ ධම්මලා සිවිල් ඝාතනය සිද්ධ වුණෙත් මේ ගමේ තමයි. 7 දෙනෙක් අමුමේ කපලා මව් කුසේ හිටපු දරුවා අරගෙන පපුවුඩ කපලා පපුවුඩ තිබ්බ පුංචි පැල්පත් වල හිටපු මිනිස්සු ත්‍රස්ත ඉතිහාසයේ පළවෙනි සිවිල් ඝාතනය කඩවත මඩුවේ.
ඉතින් එදා 7 දෙනෙක් ගෑනු ළමයි ඇදලා අරන් ගිහින් දූෂණය කරලා ඕම කරලා තිබුණා. තොටිල් හිටපු ළමයා අරන් පිටියේ ගහලා තිබුණා. චූටි ළමයෙක් ඉතින් මාස 4ක 5ක ළමයිනේ තොටිල්ල ඉන්නේ. තොටිල්ල රෙදි තොටිල්ල ඉන්න ළමයා අරන් පිටියේ ගහලා මොළ කෑලි පිටියේ.
එදා ඉඳන් අවසානම සටන 2009 මාර්තු මාසේ 25 වෙනිදා රෑ 9:55 වෙන කලින්ම පිය ත්‍රස්තවාදීත් එක තමයි සටන් කළේ. දිනේ ඕක තමයි. අවසානම සිවිල් ඝාතනයත් මේ කඩවත මඩුවේ. ඒ කියන්නේ පෙළේ ගොයන් කපලා මේ වගේම ගොයන් කපලා ගොයන් කෝල් ටික පාගලා වී ටික ට්‍රැක්ටරේට පතවලා වී ටික අරගෙන ට්‍රැක්ටරේට නගිනකොට තමයි 12 දෙනෙකුට නිකන් අතේ අඩුම ගානේ පොළු කෑල්ලක්වත් තිබ්බේ නැහැ. පොළු කෑල්ලක් අවියක් නෙවෙයි පොළු කෑල්ලක්වත් තිබ්බේ නැහැ. වතුර ටිකක් බොන්න ඇලට ගිහිල්ලා වතුර ටික බීලා ට්‍රැක්ටරේට ගෙදරින්ට නැංග මිනිස්සුන්ට තමයි ওই මිලෙච්ච කුරිරු පාපත ත්‍රස්තවාදියා ගහලා තියෙන්නේ.
අංගී මහත්තයාත් හිටියා. එහගේ කකුල දනිස්සට වෙඩි වැදුනා. එතකොට මගේ ලොකු තාත්තගේ පුතා හිටියා. එයා නැති වුණා. මගේ මහත්තයා නැති වුණා. ඒකට මාමා හිටියා. මාමා නැති වුණා. ඒක තමයි ඉතින් කුම් ගොයන් කපලා එන්න ගියේ මහත්තයාගේ නංගිගේ මහත්තයා බඩගාලා ගිහිල්ලා කුමාරියා බේරුණා. හැබැයි අතටත් ඇවිත් ගන්න බෑ. යාගේ දනිස්ස නමන්න බෑ. එයාට නංගිටන් නිවුණු දෙන්නෙක් ඉන්නවා. බබාල දෙන්නේ චූටි. මගේ මහත්තයා නැති වෙනකොට මට චූටි පුතා හම්බ වෙන්න හිටියේ. මාස 7ක් වෙනවා පුතාට. එතකොට හම්බ වෙන්න බඩේ හිටියේ. සුත්ති කියන්නේ ඉතින් අපිට පාම කරපු දෙයක්.
මිලේච්ච ත්‍රස්තවාදී ආගමක් තිබ්බේ නැහැ, ජාතියක් තිබ්බේ නැහැ, ධර්මයක් තිබ්බේ නැහනේ. එතකොට මේක රෝහල, මේක පන්සල, මේක පල්ලි කියලා බේරුවෙත් නැහනේ. කඩවත මඩුව විද්‍යාලේ ක්‍රීඩා උත්සවයේ තියෙනකොට අපේ දරුවෝ ටික ඔක්කොම ක්‍රීඩා පිට්ටනියේ උන් දැනගත්ත ගමේ ඔක්කොම එතන ඉන්නේ කියන්න. හරියටම උදේ 8:00 වෙනකොට ගෑවේ මෝටාර.
සරෝම ක්‍රීඩා උත්සව දවසේ අපි ගෙදරින්දා පොඩි දෙන්නත් එක්ක ඉස්කෝලේ ගියා. ඒ ගිහින් 11 මාර 12 විතර වෙනකොට වෙඩි පාරක් ඇහුණා, ඩාන්ඩු ගන්න සද්ද ඇහුණා. ඒ වාසේ මා ඉස්කෝලේ දරුවෙකුට වැදුනා. ඉස්කෝලේ දරුවෙකුට වැදුනා. ඊට පස්සේ අපි මෙහෙන් කෑ ගහගෙන යනවා අපිට එන්න දුන්නේ නැහැ. එතකොට අපි කිරියම්ම ඉන්න මේ ළඟ කිරියම්ම ළඟ කිරියම්ම ගියා තමයි වගේ වෙඩි වැටුනේ. ඉතින් ඊට පස්සේ අපිට පිළිපල්ලට එන්න දුන්නේ. අපි ස්පීතාලෙට ගියා. ස්පීතාලට ගියා අපිට බලන්න යන්න දුන්නේ. අපි ඊට පස්සේ එහෙම මිස්කෝල් ළඟ ඉඳලා පහුවදා මිනිහගෙන පස්සේ මේ මගේ ගෙදරට ගෙනාවෙත් නැහැ. මගේ නංගි ගෙදරට ගෙනාවේ.
I have seen how the civilians were brutally massacred by LTT. I have seen in Gonagala about 57 people were cut and chopped to death, and the pregnant mothers, their bellies cut open and the infant taken out and then cut like fish. So that is the brutality. And also about the Buddhist devotees, innocent Buddhist devotees, mostly women. They have been massacred in hundreds in front of Sri Mahabodhi. And also the novice monks who were chanting Pirit and going on pilgrimage. About 32 novice monks have been cut and chopped to death. This is all nonsense. Who else can do this type of massacres, you see? And also the LTT have themselves accepted that. And that is their tactic of terrorism. You see, they have said that we will resort to terrorism, we'll keep on killing them, but so give us Elam, then we will leave them alone. That's the thing. And also they have filmed themselves, and we have all the films that they have filmed also.
අනු පහේ දහවෙනි මාසේ 22 වෙනිදා තමා මේ ගමට රක්තවාද ප්‍රහාරයක් එල්ල වුණේ. ඒකෙන් මගේ ගෙදර 13 දෙනෙක් නැති වුණා. ඒකෙන් ඉති වෙඩි වැදුනා මට. මට එතකොට අවුරුදු 17යි. අම්මා නැති වුණා. මගේ සහෝදරයෝ 4 දෙනෙක් නැති වුණා. නැන්ද අම්මා, අක්කගේ බබා, ඒ හැමදේනම එකම මිනි ගොඩක තමයි මම විතරයි ජීවත් වුනේ. ඉතින් මේ තාටත් ඉතින් දුකයි. මේ අත උස්සන්න බෑ. කකුලට වැදුනා. නොයේ කරදර කරා. ඉතින් මං ඒ දවස්වල බැඳලා හිටියේ නෑ. ඒ උන්ගේ අතට අහු වුණාට පස්සේ ඉතින් කරන්න ඕන හැමදේම කරා. කොට කලිසම් ගහගත්තු LTT කාර්යය තමයි ආවේ. ගෑනු අයත් ආවා. කොහොම හරි අපේ ගෙදරට 8 දෙනෙක් විතර පැනලා තමයි වෙඩි තියාගෙනමයි ගේ ඇතුළට ආවේ. ඇවිල්ලා දෙමළෙන් මොනවද කිව්වා, මගේ බෙල්ල පෑගුවා. මෙතන මේ බෙල්ල පාගපුවා. මෙතෙන්ට වෙඩි තිබ්බා. තියනකොට මෙහෙන් කඩාගෙන ගියා. ආය ඇදලා අරගෙන කකුලට වෙඩි තිබ්බා මෙතනට. කකුලෙන් මෙතන උණ්ඩේකුත් තිබුණා. ඔපරේෂන් කරලා තමයි අරන් තිබුණේ. තව අම්මලාට ඔළුවට වෙඩි තියලා තිබුණා. බබාලා පාගලා තිබුණා. මාස 9යි අයියාගේ දුවට. අනිත් එක්කෙනාට අවුරුදු 5යි.
The LTT represented themselves as a Tamil liberation organization. However, due to the brutal activities of the LTTE, the Tamil community themselves suffered immensely as well, beginning their reign of terror by assassinating a Tamil leader itself, the former mayor of Jaffna, Mr. Alfred Doreappa, and later assassinating the globally recognized and respected former foreign minister of Sri Lanka, Mr. Lakshman Kadiragama.
LTT is a ruthless terrorist organization, world #1, which used humans as a human shield. They killed several innocent Tamil, their own citizens, when they were crossing from uncleared areas to cleared areas. According to Geneva Convention 4, LTT kept these innocent citizens as a human shield. So Sri Lanka Army operated a humanitarian operation. Sri Lanka Army never violated international humanitarian law. So they are the people who saved this. Sri Lanka Army saved it. But the issue, LTT now really committed war crimes, which was in 30/1 report also. So therefore, Sri Lanka, there is a law to punish them. That is where 1979 Prevention of Terrorism Act. So all these involved in LTT, those who are terrorists, can be punished in Sri Lanka under Sri Lanka criminal law. If these LTT suspects are hiding in other countries, all the international countries, all these foreign countries, those who are giving them some type of protection now must hand over them to Sri Lanka for legal proceedings.
Innocent Tamil children were abducted from their schools by the LTTE and used as child militants. They even brainwashed Tamil youths and used them as suicide bombers.
ඒ ළමයි දිහා බැලුවාම මට පෙවුන දේ මේගොල්ලෝ හරි තරුණ ළමයි තරුණ ගෑනු ළමයින්ගේ තියෙන්න ඕනේ ජවය හා ජීවය ඒ ළමයින්ගේ ඇස්වල තිබුණේ නැහැ. ඒවා මැරිච්ච ඇස්. ඒ ඇස් කිසිම දෙයක් එළියට දෙන්නේ නැහැ. පළවෙනි දවසේ ඒකේ හිටපු ඒ ළමයා හරි ප්‍රසන්න පෙනුමක් තියෙන ළමෙක්. පළවෙනි දවසේ මේ ළමයා අසනීප තත්ත්වයක් පෙන්නනවා. දෙවෙනි දවසේ මේ ළමයාට ළඟ ෆිට්ස් එනවා. කෙලිම අර අපස්මාර තත්ත්වයක් වගේ. ඔළුවේ, මූණේ, ඇඟවල් වල මොනවාම හෝ ප්‍රහාරයන්ට හෝ මොනවට හෝ ලක් වෙලා ඇතිවෙච්ච කැලැල්. මම හිතනවා ඒකට අදාළ ශාරීරික තත්ත්වයක් මොකක් හරි වෙන්න ඕනි කියලා. නමුත් ඒකේ අයත් එක්ක මම කතා කරද්දී ඒගොල්ලෝ මට කියනවා මේගොල්ලන්ට ඖෂධ ලබා දෙනවා ඒකේ අතුරු ප්‍රතිඵලයක් විදිහට තමයි මේ විදිහට ෆිට්ස් එන වැද්දේ කියලා. දරුවෙක්ගේ තරුණ කාලය කියන්නේ කාටවත් ඒ විදිහට තමන්ගේ උවමනා එපාකම් වෙනුවෙන් ආයුධ කරගන්න ඕනේ දේවල් නෙවෙයි.
594 children were forcibly recruited by the Tamil Tigers. The Sri Lankan government sent them back to school. Some of them have become doctors, scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, teachers. No country would have done that. But the government of Sri Lanka gave an amnesty not only to the adult terrorists who maimed, killed and injured people, but looked after these children as their own children. I personally visited with them at the Ratmalana Hindu College. I was very proud to see them. They were very happy. And later we found out that their mentor is living in the United Kingdom, Adele Balasingham, Australian citizen who relocated to the UK. How can Britain advocate a resolution against Sri Lanka for war crimes when the UK government is harboring one of the most important terrorist leaders, Adele Balasingham? This is a question the British government, the British leaders and the British people have to answer.
LTTE's suicide bombers not only targeted ordinary civilians, they even attacked important and prominent leaders, such as former Sri Lankan presidents Mr. R. Premadasa and Mrs. Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga, and the Indian Prime Minister, or former Indian Prime Minister, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi.
It forgets that who the LTT were, that they killed all the moderate leaders of the Tamil society, that they killed the President of Sri Lanka, the President of India, many senior ministers, many other politicians, and even more individual citizens. No mention of that.
Not under any circumstance is an attack on a World Heritage Site a legitimate act of war, although that too was quite a frequent practice by the LTTE.
Attacking World Heritage Sites is a war crime. Palmyra in Syria by the Islamic State. The Banyan images in Afghanistan by the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. The temple of the tooth relic or the Dalada Marigava in Kandy by the Tamil Tigers. The neighborhood, many structures were damaged, including the St. Paul's Church, the Natha Devala, and the beautiful Queen's Hotel. Attacking that place, the Dalada Marigava, is like attacking Mecca for the Muslims or the Vatican for the Catholics. So it is not too late to bring the perpetrators to justice. Not only the perpetrators, but those who funded and supported those attacks.
And also don't forget, LTT terrorists are blacklisted in many Western countries, but even they are blacklisted, money collected on behalf of LTT. So they have enormous funds. Those who are giving contribution are promoting LTT terrorists. And also, this terrorist organization can once again come back as a phoenix bird. In the world, there is an act, money laundering act, having every country. So immediately, government must stop the places where they collect money and file cases under money laundering for supporting terrorism or promoting terrorism in their country.
With everything that we have uncovered, it appears we have only scratched the surface. And the final decision as to who should be held accountable for war crimes is entirely in your hands. Is it the legitimate government who defended the people of its nation, or a brutal terror group such as the LTTE?
Welcome back, everyone. So what do you all think? Shocking, isn't it? You saw how the LTT terrorists did not care about their victims' race or religion. But what do we all do with this information? What we at London Initiative would like to ask from all of you is to become ambassadors of truth to counter the false propaganda by the separatists. One, there was no war between Sinhalese and Tamils. There was only a war against a terrorist organization to protect Sri Lankans of all races. LTT were merciless when they murder innocent Sri Lankan men and women. Military never attacked civilians purposefully without any provocation, but LTT did exactly the same decades before 2002 when UNHRC started collecting evidence. LTT cadre did not vanish into thin air. Some of them are still in Sri Lanka, even contested for elections. There are others hiding in developing countries, those who are directly responsible for atrocities, as well as who supported by funding the terror group. But most importantly, we want you to pass the message that we want to forgive and move forward. Tears of mourning mothers are drying off. Don't try to twist the knife. Let those wounds heal. So to elaborate more on this message, I'm going to hand over the floor to Mr. Jaraj Palihavadana, who will be talking about this in more detail. Mr. Palihavadana. Jaraj, you're muted.
Thank you, Rowan. I'm going to start the screen sharing of a PowerPoint presentation to elaborate more in details what I'm going to say about this afterwards. I'm going to start with a question of my presentation. I'm going to start my presentation with a question. Actually, what is the main reason and the obstacle to achieve peace, unity, and reconciliation for Sri Lanka? When you're looking at the current scenario, isn't it because Tamil diaspora justifying and glorifying LTT agenda in Geneva and other international forums create mistrust, generate tensions and hatred among communities in Sri Lanka? So that is why our presentation is titled as Rebuilding Sri Lanka with Peace, Unity and Reconciliation, and we are going to find out causes, what results are delaying or what results are prohibiting to implement in that nature. I'm going into the next slide. I'm going to have a little bit problem with going into that. Yeah, so this is what we are going to see as a general picture. The reality we had, or have we had discrimination? No genocide, no war crimes, no terrorism, but peace in Sri Lanka. That is the reality. So this is where all started, the myth of the Tamil homeland. Look at the history and census where majority of the Tamils are living. Total Tamil population in the world is 80 million. Out of total 80 million, 61 million are living in Tamil Nadu. Here we are looking at the real Tamil homeland where it is in India. This is how they propagated for Tamil separatism and terror in Sri Lanka. It started with 50-50 power sharing. Then it goes on to 1976 Waduk Code resolution, which is the declaration of separatism. 1977 separate country. Now, Tamil terrorism started in 1980s and TNA manifesto even in 2015 demanding for federal state. In Geneva, Tamil separatists alleged that Sri Lanka committed genocide and war crimes. In fact, who actually has committed genocide and war crimes? Rome Statute is the primary legislation defining the genocide. Article 82.1, war crime means willful killing. Who killed willfully? Who killed two heads of states, civilians, prisoners of war? Actually, none other than LTTE. Rome Statute 6A says killing members of the group, okay, separate members of the group. LTT killed selected Tamils, Sinhalese, Muslims, and Indians as well. Rome Statute Article 8.4 further says war crimes means extensive destruction and appropriation of property not justified by military necessity and carried out unlawfully and deliberate and unprovoked way. Here we are. LTT attacked on Temple of Truth in 1998, attack on Central Bank in 1996, attack on Petroleum Refinery Complex Colombo in 1995, attack on Colombo International Airport, Katnayaka in 2001. Rome Statute Article 8.6 on war crimes described like this: willfully depriving prisoner of war, other protected person of the rights of fair and regular trial. LTT terrorists captured thousands of Sri Lankan security forces members, tortured them for years and killed thereafter. So LTT killed Tamil civilians. The people were going to Tamil civilians. I'm going to give you some example. Here is what Tamilini says. The people were going to Sri Lanka army area, were deliberately shot by the LTTE. Tamilini Jayakumaran, who was the head of women's wing of LTTE political head, in her book called Under the Shade of sharp-edged sword, page 193 and 194. Now I'm going to Right Honorable Lord Nesby. Lord Nesby, describing this correctly in his speech during the House of Lords debate in 2017. Lord Nesby says, the UK must now get the UN and the UNHRC in Geneva to accept a civilian casualty level of 7,000 to 8,000, not 40,000. On top of that, the UK must recognize that this was a war against terrorism, so the rules of engagement are based on international humanitarian law, not the European Convention on Human Rights. The UK will recognize the truth that no one in Sri Lankan government ever wanted to kill Tamil civilians. The West, particularly the West, UK, must remove the threat of war crimes and foreign judges' threat overhanging and overshadows all Sri Lankans, especially their leaders. This is the number game, as Lord clearly stated and he found out. Various parties says different numbers, but actually it was less than 8,000. Numbers quoted by locally Sri Lankan-based organizations, including LTT terrorists, are in region of 7,500 to 40,000 to 100,000, quoted by foreign organizations and foreign-funded NGOs and individuals. So the genocide is a myth fabricated by LTT supporters. Even UNHRC in any other supporters that Sri Lanka is alleged or accused genocide. It was always war crimes and crimes against humanity. Here are peace attempts by Sri Lankan government by time to time. 1985, Thimphu talks. 1987, Indo-Sri Lanka Peace Accord. We all know about that, the 13th Amendment implemented afterwards. April 1989, President R. Premadasa engaged with the LTTE directly. 1994, newly elected President Chandrika Kumaratunga initiated peace talks with LTTE. Then Sri Lankan government in 1995 started negotiations again. 2001, new government of Ranil Wickremesinghe started peace talks and declared ceasefire. 2002, government and the LTT signed a ceasefire agreement while Norwegian facilitation. 2006, February, new government of Mahinda Rajapaksa and the LTT terrorists agreed on new talks to be held in Geneva on the 22nd and 23rd February. The Tamil terrorists postponement Geneva talks until 24th of April. 2006, the LTTE terrorists officially pulled out from the peace talks and indefinitely and continued terrorist attacks. So 2006, further peace talks were initiated in Oslo, but LTTE canceled the talks. So we know what happened afterwards in 2009, end of the Tamil terrorism definitely. So we can see that because of LTTE's deliberate attempts to pulling out from all the peace talks, every peace attempts made by all the successive governments has been not materialized. This is the comparison. Two aspirations, while what Tamil separatist diaspora are demanding, which is the separatism, what Sri Lankan Tamils needed, live assistance, especially for former LTT cadres, reinstigated to the society, etc., etc. Rehabilitated. Have reintegrated LTT cadres. This is a real number game. Look at this chart. So this one is showing ex-terrorists back to the society. Now they are responsible partners contributing to the prosperity and development of the country. This was then and now. More than 500 child soldiers back to the society. Altogether, 12,000 surrendered. LTT terrorists to Sri Lankan security forces were rehabilitated, provided with education, vocational training, and handed over to their relatives. Tamil diaspora are victims of geopolitics, reality, not the victim of any war crimes in Sri Lanka or failed reconciliation. Sri Lanka is committed towards the comprehensive reconciliation, peace, and prosperity within the framework of Sri Lanka. Following mechanisms have been established since 43rd session, Human Rights Council session, Office of the Missing Persons, OMP, Office of the Unity and Reconciliation, National Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka, commissions of inquiry to review the reports of previous Sri Lankan commissions of inquiries, which investigated allegedly violations of human rights and international humanitarian law, to assess the implementation of their recommendations and to purpose measures to implement line with the government's policy, that is the current one. There is another one, National Authority for Protection of Victims of Crimes and Witnesses. Lands, when you talk about the lands previously held by the security forces, more than 89% of the state land and 92% of the private lands has already been released to the civilian owners. Next, we are going to our proposals. This is the final request, what we have been making during the Human Rights Council sessions and before and going to be after as well. Recognize the defeat of the LTT as achieving sustainable peace in Sri Lanka. Accept failure in achieving accountability using retributive justice mechanisms. Recognize 59% of the Tamils are living peacefully with Sinhalese in other parts of Sri Lanka. Reject any resolution based on retributive justice, achieving accountability since it will be another failure. Reject international interventions for domestic affairs of Sri Lanka. Support Sri Lanka to develop a mechanism to achieve accountability and reconciliation. Investigate methods and practices of LTT's Tamil terrorism financing and in all forms of activities aimed at the destruction of human rights, fundamental freedoms, and democracy. Provide financial assistance and including technical assistance to Sri Lanka to achieve accountability and reconciliation within the domestic framework. Those are the requests we are making towards the Human Rights Council as well as the international community. Then we will have the peace, unity, and reconciliation. This is hard, but this is the reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Jairaj. Listening to Mr. Palihawadan's speech, it seems to me, I think most of the viewers will agree with me that LTT was like Nazis of the East, sharing Hitler's fascist ideology, trying to create a monoethnic mythical homeland for their pure race. But nevertheless, what we are promoting is we are recommending to take the moral high ground rather than asking for an eye to eye. We are promoting restorative justice, like Jairaj mentioned. Regarding Jairaj's presentation, a special thank goes to Mr. Shirantha Mendis for creating the presentation, and Mr. Ajantha Premaratna, who is a founding member of the London Initiative Group, for organizing the content of the presentation. Ajantha is going to make this presentation into a booklet, and anybody who would like an electronic copy is more than welcome to email us, and we would be more than happy to email a copy. Next, we move on to Dr. Neville Havergay, who will continue the discussion on the same theme. Dr. Havergay, the floor is yours.
Uh, can you hear me, Ruan?
Yes, yes, we can hear you, Neville.
Okay, thank you very much for your kind introduction. Then I'm not going to take much more information, and so just get back to the point. Accountability mechanism has a two branch. One branch is the distributive justice. Then other branch is the restorative justice. That distributive justice is a pretty much Western ideology. So this is the one United Nation Human Rights Council and Tamil LTT diaspora is promoting. Then what is the difference between this restorative justice and restorative justice? Core group is demanding retributive justice. This justice only for the dead. People who dead, then go and find out who did it and prosecute and punish them. But in our approach in Sri Lanka is much different. And we have adapted in Sri Lanka restorative justice mechanism. That is also accountability. That is the most important part, and pro-LTT diaspora and UNHRC and the core group is forgetting. I suggest that they should go back to the law school and start learning about these accountability issues. Then restorative justice is a religious approach, and for the domestic approach, in our country, we know Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianism, Islam, and we have a domestic solution. What is the domestic solution? Justice for survivors as well as dead. We are not looking for justice only for dead. Important matter to country to move forward, and we need to have a justice for the survivors. That is the reason Sri Lankan president has pardoned 13,000 LTT cadre. And Sri Lankan president also pardoned military personnel. And what we have done, 13,000 LTT cadre, we didn't put them back to the galley, and we didn't put them, give a hard labor into the prison. We trained them, rehabilitate them, release them to the families. And in addition to that, there's an injured and disabled LTT cadre. Those cadres also we have put them and give them back to their families. Then when the military personnel point of view, and right now, every military personnel who is joined for the army has to go through the human rights law as a 2 weeks training will be there. In addition to that, every person, every military person from top to bottom, everyone involved with the activities with the military and armed forces and even police, navy and everybody, and they have to learn the human rights law. This is the distributive justice mechanism we are looking for. Rehabilitation based on the forgiveness. What we think about the restorative justice? What is the Human Rights Commission and Western diaspora and LTT is going to achieve? We know what happened in the Sudan. Now Sudan is a chaos. Iraq and Syria, I can tell you another 20 countries, Lebanon, Libya, and never ending, that whole countries back to the same chaos. Then our country, Sri Lanka, then government didn't wait for all the rehabilitated cadre, all the people living in this country peacefully, some NGOs will come and feed them. Government of Sri Lanka has taken very strong step, and we are take care of our own people. So therefore, I suggest that UNHRC and Tamil diaspora, LTT diaspora, has to think about it, what is the meaning of accountability. We have adapted restorative justice mechanism. That is also accountability. That is the what UNHRC and core group, Western group is missing. We don't want to go back to the distributive justice and have a prosecute and punish the people. We have 13,000 LTT cadre
rehabilitated and they have released, they have married. Some of them have become a politician. Some of them, they became a doctors. Sri Lanka will never ever open file for them. This is period done. Similar to, and for the military personnel also, we are not going to open any file for them. This is done. So now we have achieved Sri Lanka restorative justice. This is the most important matter I want to relay UNHRC and LTT diaspora and other supportive group for the core group, especially London and Geneva group. And we have done rehabilitation and forgiveness and our country is moving. Then what are the things we have achieved through the Sri Lanka accountability? Office of the Missing Persons. In the context, a draft plan of the action plan has been called for by the Ministry of Justice from the OMP, Office of the Missing Person, in order to make appropriate financial provision for the immediate implementation of its statutory mandate. It may also be noted that former Supreme Court judge has been appointed as a new chairperson of Office of the Missing Person, having regard to the importance of this mechanism. Sri Lanka didn't stop that. We have further moved into the accountability on the restorative justice mechanism because that is the unique for us. So we want to protect our Tamil civilians, even though if they are former LTT cadre, we have a responsibility them to integrate into the country and be a productive for the country. And Office of the National Unity and Reconciliation is established. Financial provision over 500 million. It is not a one or two. 500 million has already been made in this regard by Ministry of Justice. Cabinet approval has been sought for the appointment of the Senior President Council as its chairperson and the senior civil servant as its Director General with the Board of Directors. Then Sri Lanka didn't stop that. We are going further. We are going to further establish restorative justice. National Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. In accordance with the procedure mandated by the Constitution of Sri Lanka and financial provision, 229 million has been allocated to perform statutory mandate for the 2021 budget. This is how Sri Lanka is working for the accountability mechanism. Let's look at one, we have another issue. So we know that, so we have a 26 years war. There's a missing person. So we need to find the solution for these people. And that is the reason we have Sri Lanka accountability mechanism, restorative mechanism, and office for repatriation we have established in Sri Lanka. Will continue functioning. It is not stopped. Will continue functioning accordance with its statutory mandate and for it the purpose of sum of 910 million has been allocated from the 2021 budget. In addition to that, guideline has been prepared for the consideration of the application for repatriation. The office has received 16,275 applications, which of right now 4,355 has been processed. January to November 2022. Not only that, and total sum of 142 million. I repeat, 142 million has been paid as a compensation. There's some issue. Some of the diaspora is misappeared and they have included the 16,275. But we have found, we have credible evidence. They are hiding in Canada and the United States, specifically United Kingdom. So therefore, we need to verify to pay who are the people really disappeared because of the war. Are they really participators of the act of war and terrorism? That is what we are doing right now. It is not stopped. Sri Lanka further enhancing their accountability mechanism. And Sri Lanka established Commission of Inquiry. headed by the Justice of the Supreme Court, to review the report of the previous Sri Lankan Commission of Inquiries, which investigated alleged violation of the human rights and international humanitarian law, to assess the status of implementation of their recommendation and to propose deliverable measure to implement the keep the in line with government policy. So we are continually engaged with the reconciliation and accountability best suited for the domestic mechanism, accountability mechanism, restorative justice. Now, when we look at this, the land issue, pro-LTT diaspora and Tamil diaspora specifically crying foul and all over the world and spreading false information. Our research center, we have get into that. We found the information. Previous held the security forces, that is 89.26% of the state land and 92.22% of the private land now have already been released to the civilian by 31st of December 2019. Still government is continuing and find out who are the real owners, because some of the owners are living abroad, some of them have died, so we don't know who are they, and so that is the reason. So otherwise 100% private land will go back to the ownership. Then we will look at the other restorative justice mechanism and accountability mechanism Sri Lanka involved. National Authority of Protection of Victim of Crime and Business. Sri Lanka established this national authority and allocated 90 million have been allocated from 2020 budget for its operation. The Victim and Witness of Crime Protection Act has been reviewed by an expert committee, and amendments to the current victim protection regime are under consideration for its efficacies of the implementation. Now, in addition to that, Sri Lanka is working very hardly, whatever things we can. Even though COVID is hit badly, Western countries are struggling, and Sri Lanka was successfully controlled and managed the COVID-19 pandemic. During that period, justice sector reform has been started. It is noteworthy that government has increased budgetary allocation, capacity building in the justice sector from the 2020 budget, not like under previous government. This allocation is 500% increase in the compared to the previous allocation. That's how Sri Lanka is moving accountability. I cannot understand why UNHRC, core group, and pro-LTT diaspora want to proceed with the restorative justice for punish and prosecute the people. Now, let's back to the conclusion. I'm not going to be a very scientific thing. Today, my presentation is very plain language, not much academic, and everybody can understand with a simple language. That's what I put the very large fonts to. Sri Lanka has completed its obligation to accountability and the reconciliation best suited for all Sri Lanka, including Tamils, Muslims, and Burghers, and everybody, and still we are continuing. Sri Lanka has completed its obligation to natural justice. We are not going after, we don't want the Western version of the justice. We have a justice mechanism for the natural justice for the all Sri Lanka, all ethnic groups, Sinhalese, Tamil, and Muslim, and other ethnic groups, but not for UNHRC and core group or some LTT diaspora living in the Western countries luxuriously. We have taken care of our own people. Core group and UNHRC agenda purely manipulated by the LPT Tamil diaspora. Finally, so this is our conclusion. As a sovereign nation, we shall reject the resolution against Sri Lanka. And we shall not allow UNHRC or core group to prosecute rehabilitated LTT cadre or military personnel. We have very successful in retributive mechanism. We are the one of the successfully rehabilitated LTT cadre. According to the information and background information we have collected through our research center, none of the LTT cadre, even they have not involved with any single violation of the law, even no traffic ticket. So this is how they are successfully integrated. Then, regardless of the outcome for the UNHRC, we may lose it, we may win it, but we have to unite to save the Sri Lanka from UNHRC and core group, and specifically LTT Tamil diaspora who's living in overseas. Their idea and their main intention to destabilize Sri Lanka, and false propaganda is propagating everywhere. That is what they are doing in the LTT Tamil diaspora. I repeat, regardless of the outcome, we have to unite all the Sri Lankan Muslims and Tamil and Sinhalese together. We have a problem, but we can resolve our problem our own means. We don't want foreign intervention. We don't want UNHRC. We don't want Britain, and we don't want core group to come and resolve our problem. See, like our government has rehabilitated 13,000 people. So we have to unite, we have to get together, and we will work together. And we will work together in future too. Thank you very much. I know that you might have some questions, but I'm ready to answer this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hevage, for that enlightening presentation. For the sake of Sri Lanka, I pray that the member states will understand the cultural peculiarities of our nation, shaped by Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam. And I hope at least the countries, the member countries that share our cultural similarities would understand us better and vote for Sri Lanka at the next UNHRC meeting. Thank you. Now it's time to move on to questions. I'm afraid there have been so many questions coming through and emailed through Jairaj earlier. We won't have time to take all the questions in, but taking the time constraint into consideration, I'm going to ask a few questions. This first one is for Mr. Palihawadana. This is a question raised by a gentleman called Chatura Prasad from Melbourne. He's asking, the film premiered today and the presentation Mr. Palihawadana showed that LTT did war crimes and is probably responsible for genocide. So why the UNHRC did not take any action against them? Jairaj?
Yeah, it's a simple answer for that. It is a technical matter. As we all know, that the Tamil separatist diaspora went to the Human Rights Council first, and they lobbied successfully to get a resolution and take some revenge actions first tried to the UN, then tried to the Human Rights Council to get some actions against Sri Lanka. So it is from the beginning, even from the beginning, Human Rights Council, when we go looking into the first report, the Rusaman report and the OISL report afterwards, everything has been set up and everything has been lobbied successfully to exclude the time period. The period they're supposed to be investigating is changed to exclude the LTTE. But as a matter of courtesy, all the OISL report says they are including the LTTE crimes, but has never been highlighted or never been brought into any of the resolutions by the core group afterwards. So none of the resolutions recommending any action against the LTTE. There are no practical actions. It's just for a courtesy, just a wording, LTTE as well as the Sri Lankan government. But this is aimed at Sri Lankan government all the time. It's been fully planned, fully implemented through the Human Rights Council.
Thank you, Gerard. Yeah, in a way, it's ironical because most of these so-called LTT diaspora have had connections to LTTE. So I'm surprised why a human rights authority, a world authority like UNHRC, is not taking into consideration this conflict of interest. Somebody who supported LTTE asking to penalize the other party. Anyway, moving on, the second question is to Dr. Hevage. This is coming from a gentleman called Arumugam Thondamam from the United States of America. So he's asking, the resolution against Sri Lanka will be tabled either on the 22nd or 23rd of March. The member countries are expected to vote. What will happen if Sri Lanka lost the vote? What will be the outcome?
Yeah, so that is the concerning issue. If we lose the vote, some reason, but we don't have to be much worried about it. Reason why UNHRC has no power, authority. They are not a tribunal, and they are not a court, and they are not a legislative authority. So in that case, what will happen? They have to implement this mechanism through other party. But when we have a proper bilateral relation with the other countries, and we have a very strong bilateral relation, that nothing will happen. We have to be firm. We have to protect people who participated for the 13,000 rehabilitated card, no matter whatever it is, and UNHRC wants to open the file for them. What is the purpose behind? So this is a coup. So that's what I'm always telling. They want to destabilize Sri Lanka. They want to go back to the ethnic violence. We are not going to do that. Similar to same as a Sri Lankan military person. We have some mechanism so we can protect our own interest. If further another country, especially core group United Kingdom or some powerful Western country interfere with in Sri Lanka, is a matter of sovereignty. If they are going to ask some material, what we have in contain, that is that they are interfering with our domestic mechanism, constitutional rights, and personal jurisdiction and autonomy of the country. I suggest that we should go to the International Court of Justice. We will file the case at the International Court of Justice. This is not a human rights. This is the purely Tamil LTT diaspora's propagative mechanism against the Sri Lanka. Then we will see how we can achieve the situation. So therefore, we have to be firm. We have to be very strong as a nation. All the Muslims, I know that they have a problem. I know that Tamils, we have a problem. And we get together and we have to sort it out. It's a political regime, and this is the way we have to engage with the democratic manner. We will not allow to another group, to UNHRC or co-group, to come and interfere and to mess this country. See, get the example, what is happening in Lebanon. Muslim brothers know what is happening in Lebanon. They know very well what happened in Iraq. They know very well what happened in Libya. And they know what happened in Syria. Do you want Syria in Sri Lanka? That is the question I'm asking. So therefore, we have to be united, and we have to have a problem, and all the problems what we have, we will resolve with the democratic mechanism. There are some grievances. We have grievances. Some of the grievance has been not addressed even 30 years. And so we need to look at all those things, and through the democratic mechanism, reconciliation and accountability mechanism, restorative justice mechanism, unique to Sri Lanka. And we had to find the solution within our bound. So that's what is going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Neville. In addition to all the current examples you have provided, we have a a historical example close to our heart from our neighbor, India. India was offered a similar solution to their religious tensions. India was partitioned along religious lines. What did it do? It ended up killing about 1 million Hindus and Muslims in broad daylight. And is the issue resolved now? No, there is still ongoing tensions at the border in Kashmir. So I think we can clearly picture what will happen if we give in to the diaspora separatist demands and divide along ethnic lines. Moving on, I have a question from London. This question comes from Dr. Punchiheva. He's asking this question from Mr. Palyawadana. How is it possible for a previous UN High Commissioner to appear on a platform organized by LTT Diaspora themed land grab from Tamil homelands when previously this High Commissioner was pushing a resolution on Sri Lanka while she was in the United Nations Human Rights Council? Is this not blatant malpractice and bias within this organization? Over to you, Jaraj.
Thank you, Ruan, for asking that question. But I have to be very careful not to get into another legal battle with high-profile figures around the world. And I'm not criticizing or I'm not critical on their role, but there is some understanding, there is some principles not to show the world that your role, whatever your role is you're holding, should not show the world that there's going to be a conflict of interest. So it is up to the certain individuals to act impartially, not only act impartially and show the world that you are acting impartially. So attending a session organized by, we call it LTT supporters, it doesn't matter whether LTT supporters or not. So your role should be transparent, whether it is the previous role or the current role or future role you're going to hold. It should be in principles what you are being holding, and your impartiality has to be visible. So unfortunately, not only from the one of the previous high commissioners, and many rapporteurs were joined in many of the discussions organized by the LTT, pro-LTT, we call it, or LTT supporters. None of them we have seen from the government side. So that is why the impartiality, the question on impartiality is arise. So it is, I think they should understand what their role is, and the impartiality should be shown to the world. Otherwise, people will lose the faith on the institutions like Human Rights Council and the UN.
Thank you, Jaraj. To Dr. Hevage quickly. Neville, this is continuation from the previous question asked from Mr. Thonderman. What will happen if Sri Lanka lost the vote next week? Sorry, that's what we asked. What will happen if Sri Lanka win the vote next week? Are we seeing the end of the light at the end of the tunnel then? Is this nuisance going to end?
In my opinion, and in standard way for the legally, if you assuming that United Nations is going to give us a accountability mechanism and they are asking through the distributive justice, which is totally we rejected. And if we win this one, they cannot bring it back to another resolution. Because there's a principle in the legal principle, somebody cannot prosecute for twice for the same crime. But Human Rights Tribunal Council, and they have no legal standing. So we know that the panel of expert report and OSL report I clearly established, and they have a very lowest threshold reasonable to believe, and they accepted the evidence as a information and so many factual inaccuracy, but still they are bringing those things. So therefore, in legally, in the civilized society for the natural society world, they cannot bring it. But Tamil diaspora is living in overseas, they will not give up. And they will find some other way to do something against Sri Lanka. So then, but Sri Lankan government has committed, and a 2021 budget, I have clearly mentioned. I went through the bottom line to find out what's going on, because we are independent people and we are not speaking on behalf of the government or the Tamil diaspora or the LTTE. We have to tell the truth to the world. So that's why this mechanism, this webinar is directly broadcasting to the United Nations 47 members countries. And so Sri Lankan government continually committed, and the commitment is showing, and number of amount of money they have allocated and commission have been allocated, what they have achieved. This process is continuing. Then Sri Lanka can be prosperous with the all community, with the harmony, and in future. So therefore, if we win, Sri Lanka will continue the same thing, and we will advocate to the Sri Lankan government as well as to other communist parties to continue this process, continuously bring the justice and accountability mechanism, restorative mechanism for the people. So as I told you before, 16,000 application has been received for the reparation. Only 4,000 or something, 4,325, if my memory is correct, is a paid 120 million. Still, we have to do a lot of work. And so we will work and we will find out who are the people who are really victim, or somebody is hiding with the bogus refugee claim in Canada or some other country. And in addition to that, what I want to tell you, that people who hiding and support for the previously support for the LTT card, we have all the information. We have a biometric data, and we have all the activities they have committed war crime and participated from 1983. Our repository, we are not going to open, but when time comes, we are ready to open for the overseas Tamil diaspora. Is LTT diaspora is going to harm our local LTT rehabilitated cadre and military personnel. So we will wait for the action, and so we are ready to roll in. And no matter what, even if we win, Sri Lanka will continue and rehabilitation process and justice process for all the group. And Muslims, now they have a burial issue came out, and we find the resolution. And so we know that COVID-19 was the new novel virus. So we don't know how it's going to be impact for the environment. Now we have to find the solution. We have continuously advocate for this kind of solution, but it came a little bit late. But don't be panic, and we will continue to justice to achieve the peace and reconciliation for the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Neville. I'm also optimistic come next week that we will hear some positive news because this false propaganda cannot continue indefinitely. Truth will come to surface one day. Just one last question. This is, I think the panelists have already probably answered parts of it. This is to Jairaj Palihavadana. This is coming from a gentleman called Deshapriya Pereira. Jairaj, if there's anything to add, please go ahead. So he's asking why the United Nations has double standards on countries who fought against terrorism. So he's giving examples saying US attack on Taliban, Iraq, Libya versus Sri Lankan military defeat of the brutal terrorist organization LTTE. Why are there double standards? Jaraj, is there anything else to add other than what's already been said?
Yeah, there's one thing I have to add. What we have to understand is the UN, not only UN, the Human Rights Council, when you're looking at the Human Rights Council, it is set up for protect and implementation of proper procedures and to make sure that the human rights standards of all the countries being adopted. Unfortunately, like the previous Human Rights Council, before that it was the Human Rights Commission. then the Human Rights Council started, because most of the allegations against the previous establishment was that it was politically biased or it was politicized, the institution. So that is why they set up a new body called Human Rights Council. So now still that criticism arises. The people believe that many countries, or when you're looking at the speeches made by during the Human Rights Council sessions, we hear various different aspects addressing many countries in different ways. Most of the European and Western countries is praising the Human Rights Council and upholding the human rights, and the other countries, which especially from Africa, Pacific, Chinese, close to the Chinese borders, and the South Asian countries are accusing that the Human Rights Council also been politicized and it is been biased. So it is ongoing phenomenon, is ongoing thing. It is what we have to understand. It is the geopolitics. Actually, it is not the human rights debating here. It is not upholding the human rights mechanism or human rights procedures are going to uphold here. It is the fighting between the great economies to find their battlegrounds. It's kind of, it has become battleground for most of the countries fighting each other outside the Human Rights Council. Now it is coming into that. So it is the geopolitical scenario, geopolitical situations are fighting here. So that is why we see that, and people, general public and the community see that it is being biased and it is being politicized. So it is the geopolitics, it is not just human right. That is what we have to understand.
Thank you, Jaraj. Thank you. It's actually ironical how the parties involved in this does not see this reality, that we brown-skinned people from a small island who eat rice, who wear sarong, are being used as pawns in a game of geopolitics. Anyway, I think it's time to wrap things up for today. So a huge thank you goes to everyone who joined from all over the world. Let's all hope the outcome of the Human Rights Council resolution next week is a positive one for all of us, all the Sri Lankans. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.